You ever see a man old enough to be a grandfather get slapped 5 times by his own son in a room full of people, and everyone just sits there pretending the music's too loud to notice? That was me, and I promise you, nothing burns slower than humiliation you can't defend. My name is Elijah Mendez, and if you think parents deserve even an ounce of respect for what they've sacrificed, stay with me. Because tonight, you'll understand what it feels like to raise your own destroyer. Savannah looked like a painting that evening. The sun sank behind the river, streaking gold across the water outside the glass windows of the Riverfront Hall, the same venue I once cleaned toilets in as a young man. I'd paid for Damien's graduation dinner here 15 years ago. The same laughter, the same chandeliers, just a different kind of silence hanging beneath it all now. Everyone looked elegant, polished, expensive. My son most of all, tall, confident, bow tie perfect, smile brighter than the champagne bubbles rising around him. He used to cling to my leg as a boy when the thunder got loud. Tonight, he wouldn't even meet my eyes. I tried to ignore that, tried to be proud, tried to tell myself it was his night, not mine. When the waiter passed, I raised my hand gently. Could I have another plate of the chicken, please? And maybe a little more of that Cabernet. That's when it happened. 5 slaps. Sharp, measured, not rage, performance. Each one echoing through the room, bouncing off wine glasses and stunned faces. The first broke the air. The second broke the rhythm of the band. By the 5th, I wasn't sure if the music had stopped or if I'd gone deaf. He hissed between his teeth, voice low but slicing. You irritate me, old man. Can you just sit and not embarrass me for once? The laughter that followed wasn't cruel. It was worse. It was nervous. The kind people make when they don't know who they're supposed to side with. I stood there, hand half raised like I might still be holding a plate. The waiter froze. My cheek burned, not from the sting but from the shame. My throat tightened so hard I thought I might choke. Sit down, Dad, he said through clenched teeth. You're ruining the evening. I didn't sit. I looked at him, really looked, and in that instant, the years replayed in reverse. Me carrying lumber to build his first home, fixing his mother's old car so he could drive to prom, working double shift so he could wear designer suits to college interviews. My hand shook. The same one that once fed him, wiped his tears, signed every check that built his world. Selena, his new bride, tried to pull him back to the table. Please, Damien, she whispered, her voice small. Cameras hovered. I noticed one of the guests filming, catching the exact angle where my humiliation gleamed under chandeliers I'd helped pay for. So I smiled. I swear I did. Not out of peace, but survival. Because if I'd spoken, the whole world would have cracked in half. I straightened my jacket, lifted my chin, and said, Enjoy your evening. Then I walked toward the exit, every step heavy with silence. Outside, the river breeze hit me like cold metal. I leaned against the hood of my old Chevy, the same one I'd refused to trade in for years because it reminded me where I came from. My reflection in the windshield looked foreign, like a man who'd just buried something he couldn't name. Inside the hall, the music resumed. Forced laughter, clinking glasses, the desperate hum of people pretending nothing had happened. My phone buzzed with messages I didn't open. Somewhere in that building, my son was probably toasting his own version of the story. I turned the key in the ignition and stared at my trembling hand on the steering wheel. The same hand that built his company, his image, his comfort. And then I whispered to it, quietly enough that only the dashboard could hear. You just slapped your signature, son. If you're still watching, drop a heart in the comments if you believe no parent deserves humiliation from their own child. Because what happened next wasn't anger. It was arithmetic. The kind of math life teaches when love turns into leverage. Morning came heavy, like the air itself was ashamed to touch me. Savannah's river breeze usually felt clean, forgiving, but that day it carried whispers. The wedding had already made its rounds through social media. Someone had filmed the entire thing. 5 slaps, 5 angles, 5 million unseen judgments pouring through the digital veins of town gossip. I didn't look at my phone. I didn't have to. People always tell you not to read the comments, but sometimes the silence from those who should have called hurts worse than the noise from strangers. No message from Damien. None from his new wife. Not even a single "Are you okay?" from our family friends. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at a half-eaten biscuit when the front gate creaked. I recognized that sound. It was old Nora's cautious walk. She'd been my secretary for 23 years. Retired 2 summers ago when her arthritis got bad, but she still called every Christmas. That morning, her knock was soft but urgent. "Elijah," she said, voice trembling through the door. When I opened it, she stood there holding a brown envelope clutched to her chest like a confession. Her eyes darted behind her, making sure no one had followed. "I shouldn't be here," she whispered, stepping in. But I couldn't sleep knowing this was sitting in my cabinet. I motioned for her to sit. The living room smelled faintly of sawdust and old leather, the same furniture my late wife had chosen years ago. Nora's hands shook as she placed the envelope on the coffee table. "He told me to hide this," she said, her voice cracking. "Said you'd sign eventually, but I knew you wouldn't." I stared at her, confused, until she slid the papers out. Loan documents, 3 pages thick, and right there, above my printed name, was my signature. Except it wasn't mine. The loop in the E was wrong. The tail on the M dragged too far right. My penmanship had always leaned left, tight, deliberate. This was sloppy, someone copying rhythm, not memory. I leaned back slowly. The room hummed with refrigerator noise and shame. Nora wiped her eyes with a tissue from her sleeve. "He said it was for expansion," she continued, "a short-term loan to impress new investors. He told the bank you'd given consent verbally." "How much?" I asked quietly. She hesitated. 180,000. The number didn't even register at first. I just kept staring at the ink, black and bold, like a wound that refused to clot. "Who processed it?" "Old Bank of Savannah. They still think you're co-signer." I rubbed my temples. The wedding humiliation was still burning under my skin, and now this. My own blood using my name to climb higher on the ladder of his pride. "Why'd you come now?" I asked her. Nora's voice cracked. "Because after last night, I knew he didn't just lose his manners, Elijah. He lost his fear of consequences. And men without fear don't stop until something stops them." Her words hung there, sharp and true. I took the papers and slipped them back into the envelope carefully, like handling evidence at a crime scene. "Did anyone else see these?" "No." He trusted me. "Good." I exhaled through my nose, steady but cold. Then it'll hurt more when he realizes trust has witnesses. Nora flinched a little at my tone, but didn't argue. I stood and walked her to the door. Outside, the sky had turned the color of steel. The neighborhood was unusually quiet. No lawnmowers, no kids playing, just that slow wind from the river carrying yesterday's whispers into new mouths. She turned to me before leaving. "You'll handle it the right way, won't you?" I forced a smile. "Nora, the right way depends on whose pride you're protecting." She looked away, then nodded, and walked off clutching her shawl. I watched her disappear past the hedges, then close the door, locking it softly behind me. Inside, I laid the papers flat on the table. My name looked strange on that page, like a stranger had borrowed my bones. The more I stared, the more the shame in my chest cooled into something harder, cleaner. "So my name pays his pride," I murmured. My reflection in the window stared back, steady and deliberate. Then, folding the papers once, I whispered to the quiet room, "Let's see what pride costs." By Monday morning, Savannah had already chosen sides. most of them silent. My phone rang with numbers I didn't recognize and stayed quiet for the ones I did. I didn't have the energy for apologies or gossip. I had only one goal: clarity. Humiliation fades. Facts don't. The office of Turner and Lowe Accounting sat off Bay Street, tucked between a florist and a lawyer's office. I'd built half of downtown once. Every brick felt like an old debt. The receptionist looked startled when she saw me. "Mr. Mendez? It's been a while." "Too long," I said. "Is Thomas in?" Moments later, Thomas Lowe stepped out of his glass office, tie loosened, gray at the temples now. We'd known each other 20 years. He handled my first tax return when I still had calluses from roofing work. He gestured me inside without a word. The air smelled of coffee and printer ink. I handed him the envelope Nora had brought, the forged loan papers still sealed. He frowned, flipping through them with his reading glasses sliding down his nose. "He forged your signature?" "Yes," I said simply. "And I want to know what else he's been signing without me." Thomas turned to his monitor, tapping keys. The screen glowed with records of Mendez Freight Solutions. I'd founded it 33 years ago with 2 trucks and a borrowed trailer. I never thought I'd have to reintroduce myself to my own company. "Damien's been filing quarterly reports," Thomas said carefully. "Everything looks clean on the surface. But see here, under corporate structure." He pointed to the screen, magnifying the header: Owner/managing member, Elijah Mendez. My breath caught. Still me. Every legal filing, every tax submission, every renewal with the state. Your name, your signature. Damien's only listed as operating manager. The words sank like stones. My son had been bragging about his company for years. Interviews, sponsorships, contracts. He'd fooled everyone, even himself. But paper doesn't lie. Paper keeps receipts long after pride forgets. Thomas printed the articles of organization and slid them across the desk. The paper was warm from the printer, ink still fresh. My name sat at the top in bold black font, neat and unshaken. He adjusted his glasses. "Elijah, if you want, I can contact the Secretary of State today," and I raised a hand. "Not yet." He hesitated. "You sure? If he's forging loans, he could drag you into serious debt. Freezing the accounts would protect you." I looked out the window. Across the street, a father was walking his little girl to school, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders. She reached up, grabbed his hand, and he squeezed it without thinking. That instinct protect, provide had once driven me too. Now was being tested in reverse. "Thomas," I said, my voice quiet, "have you ever seen a balloon rise before it bursts?" He gave a half smile. "Can't say I have." "You're about to." He leaned back, uneasy. "Elijah, whatever you're planning, just be careful. I've seen men lose their peace chasing payback." I turned to him fully, the sunlight catching the scar on my cheek from an old roofing accident. "I'm not chasing payback. I'm reclaiming authorship." He nodded slowly, then reached into a drawer. "You might want a hard copy for your records." He handed me the printed filings neatly bound together, my ownership highlighted in yellow. I took them, tracing the line of my name with my thumb. "This is what he forgot," I said softly. The hands that built him still hold the pen. Thomas exhaled. "So what's next?" I slipped the documents into my briefcase. The lock clicked like punctuation. "Next? Nothing yet." I stood, straightening my jacket. Thomas frowned. "You're not freezing anything?" I shook my head. "Not yet." He followed me to the door. "Then what do you want him to feel?" I paused, hand on the knob, and looked over my shoulder. The air outside shimmered with heat, Savannah sun cutting through the blinds like confession light. I want him to feel the air get thin first. The door shut behind me with a quiet click, and for the first time in days, my steps didn't tremble. 2 weeks after the wedding, Savannah's gossip had cooled, but Damien's social media was louder than ever. Every post screamed success. Silk robes, champagne on balconies, drone shots of ocean waves curling beneath honeymoon sunsets. He tagged sponsors, brands, and journalists who'd once called him the youngest logistics mogul in the South. Every caption dripped with pride. Self-made. Legacy built. No handouts. I watched from my office chair, the glow of his posts reflecting off the glass of my family photo, the one with his mother's hand resting on my shoulder. I didn't feel anger, just quiet confirmation that the man I'd raised believed his own illusion. Across the screen, Damien's voice came through a podcast clip. He was being interviewed from Paris, grinning, champagne in hand. Hard work and vision. That's what I tell young entrepreneurs, he said, flashing his wedding band. You can't wait on blessings. You build them yourself. My phone vibrated, a message from my accountant, Thomas. Thomas, corporate card flagged. Large overseas transaction declined. You want to authorize? I typed one word, no. In Paris, Damien and Selena were seated in a candlelit restaurant overlooking the Seine. The waiter had just set down their wine when he returned, apologetic smile in place. Sir, the card declined. Perhaps you have another? Selena blinked. That's impossible. Try again. The waiter nodded, tried, and returned, shaking his head. Says primary holder approval required. I'm sorry. Damien laughed it off for the table beside them. Too proud to look rattled. Probably a fraud alert. Happens when you travel. But under the table, his hand trembled slightly. Selena leaned closer. Damien, are you sure the account's fine? He snapped. Of course it's fine. My company handles more in a day than this dinner costs in a month. But when she went to the restroom, he pulled out his phone. Notifications buzzed. Not from business, but from the bank app. 2 alerts. Transfer blocked due to missing authorization. Please contact primary account holder. He scrolled again, trying to hide his confusion. Primary account holder. Who else would that be? The question planted itself like a splinter. He typed an angry email to the bank, demanding clarification, his tone curt, imperial. This is Damien Mendez, CEO of Mendez Freight Solutions. Unlock my card immediately. There must be a mistake. Minutes passed. The waiter refilled water glasses. Selena returned, her smile fragile. Did it go through? He forced a laugh. Just a small glitch. Then the reply pinged in from the bank. Dear Mr. Mendez, as an authorized user, your access requires approval from the primary account holder, Elijah A. Mendez. Please have him contact us directly. His eyes froze on the screen. The name, my name, felt like a ghost walking through the middle of his honeymoon. Selena noticed. What's wrong? He locked his phone too fast. Nothing. But all through dinner, his jaw stayed tight, the charm draining out of him. The illusion, the curated empire of borrowed shine, flickered like a dying bulb. Across the ocean, I sat on my porch, a cup of black coffee cooling beside me, watching the Savannah River roll past like it had for 50 years. The night air carried no sound except crickets and quiet satisfaction. I wasn't destroying him. I was introducing him to gravity. My phone buzzed again, a photo notification from Thomas. A screenshot of the declined transaction, exactly as the waiter saw it. The message read simply, decline confirmed. Tag reads, primary holder approval required. I saved the image to a folder labeled proof. Somewhere in Paris, my son probably thought the world had glitched around him. But paperwork doesn't glitch. It remembers exactly who built the foundation. He'd learn that soon enough. In the restaurant, as cameras flashed from another influencer table, Selena asked again, who's the primary holder? Damien's voice came out low, almost a whisper. Primary holder? Who else would that be? By Thursday morning, the illusion had begun to bleed. Savannah Skyline was waking up when I got the first text from Nora. Sir, something's happening at the office. Payroll bounced. I stared at the message for a long second, then the next one came through. He's blaming the bank. People are scared to talk. The river outside my window looked calm, but inside that office, I could already imagine the storm. At Mendez Freight, payroll day used to be routine. Coffee brewing, printers humming, and a chorus of thank yous from warehouse staff who counted on every Friday deposit. That morning, phones rang nonstop. Drivers lined up at HR, waving pay stubs that said, "Payment rejected. Authorization revoked." Damien stood in the center of the chaos, jaw tight, shirt sleeves rolled halfway, trying to look in control. "It's a system error," he barked, pacing. "Everyone relax. I'll handle it." But his voice carried that edge, the one that turns order into fear. He snatched a paper from his operations manager, scanned it, and slammed it on the desk. "How can authorization be revoked when I run this company?" The manager stammered. "Sir, the email came directly from the bank." "Forward it to me," Damien snapped. The manager hesitated, then whispered, "Sir, it's already CC'd to corporate headquarters." "Corporate headquarters?" Damien laughed bitterly. "That's me." But even as he said it, Nora, quiet as ever, slipped past the crowd, her phone hidden in her palm. She'd stayed on as a consultant after retirement, helping with payroll transitions. And she still remembered whose name was on the founding documents. She typed quickly under her desk. "Sir," he's shouting, "people are quitting. Should I step in?" I replied simply, "No. Just observe." Back at the office, Damien opened his laptop. The inbox was flashing red. Overdraft notices, vendor delays, account alerts. He clicked the top one. From Corporate Payroll Services. Subject, urgent, payment batch rejected. Message, payment rejected. Authorization revoked by primary account holder. Please contact Elijah Mendez for reinstatement. The words hit him like ice water. His face flushed, veins pulsing at his temple. "Who the hell?" he started, but the question died in his throat. Nora caught the look in his eyes and stepped back, pretending to file papers. Around him, employees whispered. Rumors travel faster than memos. Everyone had seen the name on that email. Elijah A. Mendez. Damien slammed his laptop shut so hard it rattled the coffee mugs on the desk. "Nobody leaves until this is fixed," he shouted. "If someone's playing games, I'll find out who." But the fear had shifted. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about power, and everyone could feel who still held it. Nora slipped outside under the excuse of phone call. Her fingers trembled as she sent me another message. "He's losing control. He knows it's you." I didn't answer right away. Instead, I sat in my study, sunlight streaking across the room, landing on the old oak cabinet near the window. For years, that drawer had held memories, birth certificates, property deeds, my late wife's letters. But behind all that, at the bottom, was something else. A sealed brown envelope, untouched for over a decade. Across its front, in my handwriting, were two words: revocation package. I created it years ago, back when Damien first joined the business, just in case. It held every form, every legal trigger I'd need to reclaim full control. I'd hoped I'd never open it. But pride, like fire, has a way of finding dry wood. I unlocked the drawer, slow and deliberate, the key cold in my hand. The metal clicked open with the sound of a door I'd once promised myself I'd never walk through again. The envelope sat there, perfectly sealed, the edges slightly yellowed with time. I ran my thumb along the fold, feeling the weight of every silent warning I'd ignored for years. Outside, church bells rang faintly from downtown, a sound meant for peace, not for what I was about to do. I picked up the envelope, stared at the bold letters once more, and whispered, "Forgive me, Maria, but your boy forgot who built the roof he stands under." Then I placed the envelope on the desk, flat and centered like a declaration. Tomorrow, the air would start to thin. The next morning, Savannah was dressed in storm light, gray, still, and waiting. I wore the same navy suit I'd worn to my wife's funeral years ago. It felt right for what I was about to bury, the illusion of my son's empire. Rosa Alvarez's office sat on the corner of River and Hull, a building she bought with her first case settlement. She'd been my attorney for 15 years, sharp as cut glass, with eyes that saw straight through deception. When I walked in, she looked up from a pile of contracts and smiled faintly. "Mr. Mendez, I was wondering when you'd finally call." I sat across from her, placing the revocation package on her desk. "It's time, Rosa." She slid on her reading glasses, opening the envelope with surgical precision. As the papers unfolded, her brows drew together. "You kept everything: operating agreements, ownership certificates, account authorizations. You even included notarized copies." "I don't like surprises," I said quietly. She gave a small, impressed chuckle. "Neither do I." She flipped a page. "You still hold 100% of the company. Damien's only listed as managing operator. That means every deal he's signed, every card he's used, runs under your guarantor line." I looked at her sharply. "Guarantor?" Rosa nodded, turning her monitor toward me. "Your son's been busy. He opened 3 additional credit lines in the past year, all under Mendez Freight Solutions, each using your name and social security number as financial guarantor." She clicked a few keys. The screen filled with scan forms. There was again my forged signature, the same awkward loop from the wedding loan. I leaned forward slowly. "You're saying if those loans default, they fall back on you," Rosa finished. "And judging by these balances, he's close. He's been running accounts hot, expanding too fast, spending too loud." The printer hummed beside her, spitting out each page of the evidence. I picked up one, bank letterhead, my name in bold. It was a guarantor authorization form dated 6 months ago. She slid a pen across the table. "With one signature, you can end this illusion today. I can file an immediate revocation, freeze all business credit, and notify the banks. He won't be able to charge a coffee without your consent." Her tone was calm, but the weight of her words settled like iron. I stared at the pen, tapping it lightly against the paper. My reflection in her office window looked older than I remembered. Lines deepened, jaw tense, eyes holding both fury and fatigue. "Do you have children, Rosa?" I asked. "One daughter," she said softly. 16. Thinks I'm a villain for making her earn her own phone bill. I smiled faintly. "Then you understand. When they're small, you teach them not to touch fire. When they're grown, you sometimes have to let them burn their own fingers." She leaned back, watching me closely. "So you're not signing?" "Not yet." Her voice sharpened. "Elijah, this isn't about pride. This is about liability. He's tying your name to his recklessness." I stood, buttoning my jacket. "I know, but cutting his hair too soon won't teach him where it came from." Rosa sighed, frustration flickering under her professionalism. "You've always been too patient." "Patience isn't mercy," I said, gathering the papers. "It's calculation." She folded her hands, studying me. "You really believe humiliation can teach what guidance couldn't?" I met her gaze. "Sometimes truth only grows in silence, and pride must mature before harvest." Rosa's eyes softened. "You sound like a preacher." "No," I said, sliding the documents back into the envelope. "Just a father who finally stopped mistaking love for leniency." I turned to leave, but she called after me. "Elijah, when it's time, I'll be ready to file." I nodded once. "When it's time, Rosa, not before." The rain began as I stepped outside, gentle at first, then heavier, each drop echoing against the sidewalk like a clock counting down to something inevitable. I walked to my truck, the envelope tucked under my arm, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel powerless. Because this wasn't vengeance anymore. It was truth, waiting to be signed. Paris glittered that night, but beneath its glow, my son's empire was crumbling one transaction at a time. From the balcony of their honeymoon suite, Damien had the city stretched below him, taxis crawling like gold ants, the Seine glinting under streetlights. He raised a glass of champagne, still trying to believe he owned everything he touched. Selena filmed him for her followers, smiling as if nothing could touch them. Downstairs, the hotel manager was less enchanted. Behind the marble counter, two receptionists whispered to each other in French, their smiles polite but strained. Damien didn't notice until the bill came. "Excuse me, sir," the manager said carefully. "Your payment was declined. Perhaps you can try another card." Damien laughed, confident, pulling out another black corporate card and sliding it across the counter. He watched the man swipe it, then frown. "Declined," the manager said again, voice lower. "The message says authorization revoked." Selena blinked. "That's not possible. Try again." The card went through the reader twice more. Same message. The room suddenly felt smaller, the chandelier light too bright. Damien pulled out his phone. "Let me handle this." He stepped aside, jaw tightening as he called the bank. The call connected to a polite, automated voice. "All corporate accounts for Mendez Freight Solutions have been restricted. For assistance, please contact the primary account holder, Elijah A. Mendez." He froze. "What?" The voice repeated it. The name landed like a slap, one he couldn't return. "Sir," Selena whispered. "What's happening?" He ignored her and pressed 0 until the line transferred to a live agent. "There's been a mistake," he said quickly. "This is Damien Mendez, CEO of Mendez Freight. My cards aren't working." The woman on the other end hesitated. "Mr. Mendez, our records list you as an authorized user, not the primary. We can't discuss account reinstatement without Mr. Elijah Mendez's permission." Damien's chest tightened. "I am the CEO." "Yes, sir," the woman replied gently, "but you are not the owner." The call disconnected before he could respond. Selena's voice cracked behind him. "Damien, what's going on?" "The manager's asking for another form of payment." He turned, forcing a smile that barely held. "Just a temporary hold, baby. I'll fix it." But his hands were trembling. He tried his personal card. Declined again. Selena stepped closer, voice breaking. "Did your father—" "Don't," he snapped. "Don't start with that." But even as he said it, the thought burned. He dialed another number, one he hadn't called in weeks, mine. The line rang twice before I answered. "Son," the sound of my voice froze him. "You think this is funny?" he shouted, pacing the marble lobby. "You cut me off in the middle of my honeymoon." "I didn't cut you off," I said calmly. "I corrected a mistake. I built that company." His voice cracked, drawing glances from nearby guests. "I earned every contract, every deal, every card." I could hear Selena crying in the background, the manager's low voice asking if they had cash or another bank to contact. "You built it," I said slowly. "Tell me, Damien, whose name is on the foundation stones? Who signed the permits, paid the insurance, back your credit lines?" He didn't answer. The silence told the truth before his pride could lie again. The hotel staff began whispering, watching the scene unravel. Selena held her hands to her face, humiliated. Damien turned away from her, lowering his voice. "You can't do this to me, old man. Not like this. You can't." "Son," I said quietly, steady as breath. "I already did." There was a beat of silence, thick, final. Then the line went dead. Across the ocean, I sat at my desk, phone still warm in my hand. My voicemail blinked, one new message. I pressed play. "Mr. Mendez, this is Patricia from the Bank of Savannah. We're calling to confirm that all corporate authorizations under Mendez Freight have been successfully revoked per your request. No further charges will process without your explicit consent. The message ended with a soft beep. I leaned back, closing my eyes. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving Savannah washed clean. Somewhere in Paris, the music had stopped too. I whispered to no one in particular. Lesson 1. Money built on another man's mercy always runs out first. By the time Damien's flight landed back in Savannah, the shine had drained from his life. His honeymoon luggage, once full of designer suits and champagne-soaked memories, was now just baggage, both literal and spiritual. He stormed into Mendez Freight's glass headquarters at 8 in the morning, sunglasses on, voice sharp. The office, once a hive of polished efficiency, was eerily quiet. Half the desks were empty. Phones rang unanswered. A few employees whispered in corners, eyes darting as he passed. "Where's everyone?" Damien demanded, slamming his briefcase on the front counter. His assistant, a young woman who had been fiercely loyal until the paychecks stopped clearing, didn't meet his eyes. "A few people quit, sir. Others are waiting for confirmation the company's solvent." "Solvent?" he repeated, stunned. "We're fine. I am a company." But even as he said it, his voice cracked under the weight of disbelief. He strode down the hallway to the boardroom, the soles of his shoes echoing against polished floors that suddenly sounded too empty. Inside, 3 department heads sat waiting, their faces drawn. On the table were invoices, dozens of them, stamped in red, payment past due. "What's this?" Damien barked. The logistics director cleared his throat. "Vendors haven't been paid in 2 weeks. Fuel supplier cut our line of credit. Drivers walked out after payroll failed again." Damien's face reddened. "Because the bank screwed up." The HR manager spoke softly, like she was talking to a wounded animal. "The bank said they need authorization from your father." That word, father, hit him like a hammer. "He's retired," Damien hissed. "He doesn't have authority here." The woman looked down. "Legally, he does. His name's still on every contract." Silence fell. The hum of the AC sounded like mockery. He grabbed the invoices and hurled them across the room. "This is sabotage," he shouted. "Somebody changed the accounts." "Who changed the accounts?" No one answered. But from the far corner, a quiet click echoed, the sound of a phone recording. The operations manager, a man named Carter, had slipped his phone out moments earlier. He didn't do it to humiliate Damien. He did it because he'd worked under my leadership for 20 years, and loyalty, for him, meant truth. By noon, that recording found its way to my inbox. The email was simple, from Carter Jenkins. Subject: "Thought you'd want to hear this, sir." Attachment: boardroom_meltdown.mp3. I hesitated before pressing play. Damien's voice filled the room, raw, desperate, stripped of every ounce of polish. "Who changed the accounts? Who gave him that kind of power? I run this company." The recording crackled with heavy breathing, the scrape of chairs, then a woman's trembling voice. "You don't own what your father never gave away, Damien." Then a door slammed. I sat back in my chair, listening again. I didn't feel triumph, just the slow ache of a father watching his son collapse under the weight of his own lies. Every sound in that file was proof of what pride sounds like when it starts to drown. I saved the recording into my evidence folder beside the bank statement and the forged documents. My hands didn't shake anymore. This wasn't about revenge. It was about accountability. I opened my laptop and composed a new email, the cursor blinking like a quiet heartbeat. To Rosa Alvarez. Subject: internal audit. Rosa, proceed immediately. Pull every record, every vendor statement, every loan he's touched. I want a full picture. Use the authorization forms in the revocation package. file under company restoration. I paused before signing. Then I typed the last line deliberately. No more warnings. Yem. As I hit send, a soft ding filled the room, the kind of sound that once meant business but now felt like judgment. Outside my window, the Savannah sky shifted from silver to deep gray. Somewhere downtown, Damien was probably pacing that boardroom, still yelling at ghosts. But what he didn't know was that the walls were already closing in, not from anger, but from truth finally taking its rightful shape. The rain had turned steady by the time Rosa called. Her voice came through calm, but there was a weight under it. Elijah, you should come to the office. You'll want to see this with your own eyes. When I arrived, the blinds were drawn, the lights low. Rosa's assistant, a young man named Andre, sat behind a laptop surrounded by papers, receipts, and highlighted spreadsheets. The hum of the printer was the only sound in the room, steady and mechanical, like a heartbeat that refused to rest. Rosa motioned to the chair across from her. We pulled everything. Bank transfers, wire histories, vendor payments, charitable deductions. I told you Damien was reckless. But this crosses into something darker. She slid a printed spreadsheet toward me. The columns stretched across pages, dates, amounts, transaction IDs. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips as I scanned line after line of numbers until one stopped me cold. Recipient, Elam Memorial Fund. Amount, $72,400. Description, equipment upgrade, youth program. I knew that name like I knew my own reflection. Elam Lucia Mendez. My late wife. Her memorial fund was sacred ground, created after she passed to sponsor underprivileged youth in Savannah. Every cent had meaning. Every dollar told a story of the woman who'd once given her entire savings to build a reading center in her old neighborhood. I looked up, my voice low but steady. This account is closed. Rosa nodded grimly. It should have been, but someone reactivated it last year using your authorization code. It was routed through company expenses. Andre clicked a key, and the screen lit with scan forms. My signature was there again, crooked, lazy, foreign. Rosa continued, her tone careful. The money didn't go to the memorial program. It went to a shell vendor, LM Logistics Training LLC. No tax record, no staff. It's an empty entity. We traced the transfers. She paused, clicking the next slide. Final destination, Damien Mendez, personal investment account. The room fell into a silence, so deep I could hear the rain striking the windows in slow, cruel rhythm. I didn't speak. I just stared at the document, and my wife's initials sitting beside my son's name. There was a kind of betrayal that didn't make you angry, didn't make you shout. It just hollowed you out piece by piece. Rosa leaned forward. Elijah, I can file charges. Fraud, forgery, misappropriation of charitable funds. Any one of these could land him in prison. I kept my eyes on the page. When did he transfer it? 6 months ago, she said quietly, right before he proposed to Selena. We think the funds helped pay for their engagement party and the wedding venue deposit. The breath left my lungs like something physical had been pulled out of me. The same hall where I'd been slapped, bought with her charity money. Rosa's voice softened. I know this is hard. I finally looked at her. Hard isn't the word. This is blasphemy. Andre closed the laptop gently, giving me space. I stood, walking to the window. Outside, the rain streaked down the glass, blurring the lights of Savannah into smears of gold and gray. My reflection looked like a stranger behind a veil. Rosa joined me quietly. Elijah, what do you want to do? I turned slowly. Finish the audit. Document everything. Every cent. Every signature. Every lie. If he built a throne from her name, I want to see every brick of it. She nodded and handed me the printed spreadsheet, pages clipped neatly together. The ink was still slightly damp, the numbers shining faintly under the fluorescent light. I stared at the line again, Ella Memorial Fund. My throat tightened, but my voice came out steady. He didn't just steal my name. I gripped the paper until it wrinkled in my hand, knuckles pale. He stole her peace. Rosa said nothing. She didn't have to. Some truths were too heavy to comment on. The rain outside grew louder, almost like applause from a cruel audience. I tucked the papers under my arm and walked out without another word. Behind me, Rosa exhaled, the printer still humming, printing evidence that could shatter a legacy. Savannah's heat had returned, but the chill that gripped the Mendez name had nothing to do with weather. By midweek, every financial artery tied to Mendez Freight Solutions had gone still. The banks moved faster than even Rosa expected. When truth catches momentum, it doesn't ask permission. At 9 a.m., Rosa forwarded me the confirmation. Subject: account suspension notice. Body: all transactions suspended by majority owner authorization. Pending verification. I read the line twice. Majority owner, two words my son had spent years pretending didn't exist. Across town, Damien was discovering the full meaning of them. His phones buzzed nonstop. Vendors calling, banks calling, even his gym calling. Every system linked to his name now returned one message: payment declined. At first, he still bluffed. There's a mistake, he told the credit union manager, pacing outside his condo. I'll fix it. But when he opened his email, the truth hit like a hammer. From Bank of Savannah. Subject: account status update. Message: all business and personal accounts associated with Mendez Freight are frozen pending owner verification. Contact Elijah Mendez for further assistance. Selena found him in the kitchen, surrounded by unopened letters and unpaid bills. Damien, she whispered. What does this mean? He slammed a folder shut. It means my father's lost his mind. She stepped back, her voice breaking. Then fix it. They repossessed the Mercedes this morning. I watched them drive it off the lot. He ignored her, refreshing his bank app over and over like it might suddenly change its mind. But zeros stayed zeros. When his phone rang again, it was the dealership demanding payment for the second car. Selena's patience cracked. You told me we were secure, that everything was under your name. Were you lying to me, too? He looked at her, tired, cornered. I made it all happen, Sel. Every dollar, every deal. He just kept his name on paper. It's not fair. She whispered something soft, almost pity, and walked out, leaving her ring on the counter. The sound of it hitting granite was louder than any argument they'd ever had. By noon, social media finished what the bank started. The same followers who'd called him visionary last month now called him fraud. Headlines appeared. Local moguls' finances frozen amid audit. The comments below were merciless. He called me 7 times that day. I didn't answer once. Some lessons echo louder in silence. That evening, I drove downtown. The sun was folding itself into the horizon, spilling gold over the cobblestones. From a block away, I could see his building, glass walls reflecting the last light like a dying flame. A white paper fluttered against his condo door. I didn't have to get close to know what it was. The big, bold print was visible even from the street. Notice of eviction. A young man in a suit, probably from the leasing office, walked past carrying a clipboard. He paused when he saw me leaning against my truck. You know him? He asked. I nodded once. Used to. He sighed. Shame. He's not the first who thought money couldn't vanish. I said nothing, just watched as he pinned the paper tighter against the door, the tape crinkling under his thumb. Inside, the lights were off. For a long minute, I sat there behind the wheel, the hum of my engine steady, my heart quieter than it had been in months. The man my son had become was no longer unreachable. He was unraveling in real time. Still, I didn't get out. I didn't need to. The lesson was already written in ink and consequence. As the clerk walked away, the last rays of light caught the edge of the eviction notice, making it glow white against the glass. I shifted into drive and whispered to the empty seat beside me. That's how illusions end, quietly, with paper and tape. Then I drove off into the cooling dusk, leaving the sound of Savannah traffic to swallow what was left of his empire. The knock came after midnight. 3 hard pounds that rattled the glass of my front door. I didn't need to look through the peephole to know who it was. Only one man, alive, still knocked on my door like he owned the house. When I opened it, Damien stood there, unshaven, eyes bloodshot, rain clinging to his hair. The suit he wore was wrinkled and damp, the shine gone from both fabric and face. Behind him, a taxi idled in the street, headlights cutting through the drizzle. "Can I come in?" he asked. His voice cracked somewhere between demand and plea. I stepped aside. "You already did once, remember? Didn't need permission then, either." He flinched but entered, dripping water onto the hardwood floors his mother once polished every Saturday. The house smelled of coffee and cedar like it always had. For a moment, I saw the boy he used to be, barefoot, running through the hall, laughing. But that image vanished as quickly as it came. He looked around the living room like a stranger visiting a museum. "You've been busy," he muttered. "Banks, auditors, lawyers. Do you have any idea what you've done?" I didn't answer. Instead, I walked to the dining table, where I'd already laid out a neat stack of papers. Every forged signature, every fraudulent transfer, every fake company seal Rose's team uncovered. The documents looked sterile, almost peaceful, spread under the lamplight. Damien stared at them, his expression twisting. "You've been collecting evidence against me?" "No," I said quietly. "I've been collecting truth. Evidence is what you leave behind when you stop telling it." He stepped closer, gripping one of the pages. "You could have come to me first." I raised an eyebrow. "Like you came to me before you forged my name? Before you drained your mother's memorial fund to impress people who don't even remember your middle name?" His mouth opened, then closed again. The silence between us was thick alive. He dropped into a chair, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. "You think I meant for it to go this far?" he whispered. "I was trying to prove something. I just wanted to be seen." "You were seen," I said, folding my arms. "You had everything. You just wanted the applause, too." He looked up at me, eyes wet, voice trembling with anger. "You humiliated me, Dad. Froze my life. Everyone's talking, calling me a fraud." I leaned forward. "You did that yourself the moment you traded honesty for ego." He slammed his fist on the table, the papers fluttering. "You could have helped me fix it." "I did," I said. "I stopped you from sinking deeper." He stood, pacing wild. "You took everything. My accounts, my wife, my reputation. No, I cut in. You gave them away. All I did was remove the stage lights so you could finally see the damage." He stopped, chest heaving. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The rain outside grew heavier, drumming on the roof like an old clock counting down the end of something sacred. Then I sat down, calm, deliberate, and began organizing the papers into a single stack. "Here's the truth, Damien. You wanted to be a man of your own? Here's your chance." He frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" I slid the folder across the table. "These documents belong to you now. The debt, the wreckage, the silence. It's all yours. No credit, no inheritance, no lifeline. You said you didn't want to live in my shadow. Fine. Step out of it." He stared at the folder like it was poison. "You're cutting me off? I'm setting you free," I said evenly. "Free to rebuild, free to suffer, free to learn what a man really earns when he stops faking ownership." The rain outside softened into a whisper. Damien looked down at the documents again, then at me, eyes red, mouth trembling. "You really mean this?" I nodded. "Every word. For a moment, he just stood there, shoulders shaking, trying to find something to say. But there was nothing left. He turned toward the door, opened it halfway, then stopped. His voice was barely a whisper. "You always told me to stand on my own 2 feet. I met his gaze steady. And now you will. Just remember, you'll feel the ground better without the cushion of lies." He left without another word. The door clicked shut behind him, and I was alone again, surrounded by silence and proof. I gathered the last sheet from the table, the one with his forged signature, and folded it neatly. The ink had faded, but the betrayal was still fresh. Then I whispered to the empty room, "You wanted to be a man of your own? Here's your chance with empty pockets." The storm that had been building for months finally broke, not with thunder, but with paper. The audit Rose's team had been compiling went public that Monday morning, stamped, signed, and sealed. No rumors, no leaks, just fact after fact, line after line, like nails closing a coffin on everything Damien once called his empire. At 8 a.m., the Savannah Chronicle ran the headline across its homepage. "Mendez Freight Founder Reclaims Company After Son's Fraud." The photograph beneath it was one I hadn't. Posed for a file image from 5 years ago, when I was still the face of the company. My expression looked firm, almost stern, like a man who knew storms before they arrived. I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. I just watched. Inside the boardroom I once built with my own hands, Rosa stood at the head of the table. Her voice carried the calm precision of authority. Effective immediately, all executive power reverts to Mr. Elijah Mendez, original founder and registered owner of Mendez Freight Solutions. Damien Mendez is hereby removed from any and all positions within the company pending civil review. She paused, glancing toward the small crowd of employees gathered for the announcement. Some faces looked relieved, others uneasy. Loyalty had fractured in the months of chaos. Rosa continued, "Our goal is restoration, not revenge. The company will recover, but accountability is non-negotiable." In the back of the room, 2 former department heads nodded silently. They'd stayed through the worst of it, unpaid for weeks, still showing up every morning. I made a mental note to double their salaries when the dust settled. Damien wasn't present. He couldn't be. His attorney had already received the legal notice that morning. His badge deactivated, access revoked, accounts frozen. Rosa had seen to it personally, but his presence lingered like smoke. His name had once filled this space, printed on every memo, echoed in every meeting. Now, only whispers remained. The operations manager, Carter, stood to speak. "I'll testify if needed," he said quietly. We all saw what happened. He ignored safety regulations, refused audits, yelled at staff. He wasn't the leader we needed. Another voice added from the corner. "He told us the company was his, but we always knew who really signed our paychecks." I didn't turn to look at them. Pride wasn't what I felt. It was something heavier, quieter. The kind of ache that comes from realizing you've reclaimed what you never wanted to lose in the first place. Rosa's assistant walked in holding a folder. "The press release is ready," he said, handing it to her. She read it aloud. "Effective immediately, Elijah Mendez is reinstated as Chief Executive Officer of Mendez Freight Solutions. The transition marks a new chapter for the company, reaffirming the principles of integrity and stewardship that defined its founding." I signed at the bottom. The pen didn't shake. The ink spread clean and permanent. Rosa smiled faintly. "It's official." Outside, reporters were already gathering near the front steps. Cameras flashed through the glass walls, catching glimpses of paperwork and faces. I stayed where I was. Let them take their pictures. Let the world interpret the silence however it wished. The real noise came later from televisions across the city. Every local channel ran the same footage. The press release scrolling across screens, the anchor's polished voice narrating. Following months of investigation, the Mendez freight audit confirms misuse of company funds under former executive Damian Mendez. Founder Elijah Mendez has been reinstated as CEO after proving sole ownership. The words felt surreal, even as I heard them. I poured myself a glass of water and turned the volume down. On screen, the headline glowed beneath my old photograph. Mendez Freight founder reclaims company after son's fraud. Somewhere downtown, Damian was seeing the same headline, probably in a bar or some friend's apartment. Face hidden under a cap, pride stripped to the bone. I didn't call him. I didn't need to. The whole city had already delivered the message for me. Rosa packed her files and paused at the door. You did what had to be done, Elijah. I nodded once. No, I just stopped pretending it wasn't already mine. The television went silent. The office did too. And for the first time in years, the company finally sounded the way it used to, steady, honest, and still. Winter came quiet that year, the kind that dulls every streetlight and makes even pride sound softer. 3 months had passed since the audit, since the headlines, since Savannah learned that the empire Damian Mendez bragged about was built on borrowed breath. The noise had faded now. Only silence remained, and silence can be crueler than shame. He was living out of his car by then, a silver sedan I recognized from his wedding day, now dulled by dust and rain. It sat parked behind an old grocery store near the river, tucked between dumpsters and delivery trucks. At night, the lot filled with the hum of engines and the lonely rhythm of men waiting for tomorrow's work. Damian had taken to odd jobs, warehouse shifts, hauling boxes, fixing pallets. No uniform, no title, no applause. Just his hands and the quiet. Sometimes when he clocked in, he'd catch a glimpse of himself in the warehouse mirror. The same face that once smiled on magazine covers, now gaunt, eyes ringed with exhaustion. He didn't talk much. People around him only knew him as D. He never corrected them. When you've fallen that far, even your own name feels like a luxury. That Friday night, I couldn't sleep. The company was running smoothly again, contracts renewed, staff rehired, but peace doesn't always come with success. Some ghosts refuse to fade until they're seen. So I drove. No destination in mind, just streets that remember my footsteps. Around midnight, I found myself near the river, headlights cutting through the fog. That's when I saw it, the silver car, windows fogged, a sleeping shadow inside. I pulled over across the lot, engine humming low. Through the windshield, I could see him, my son, curled awkwardly in the driver's seat, jacket zipped to his chin. The sight hollowed me. I had imagined many endings for him, but never this. My son, the man who once wore custom suits and arrogance like armor, now reduced to breathing against glass. I reached into the passenger seat where a paper bag rested. Chicken sandwich, bottled water, 2 apples. I'd bought it earlier, though I couldn't explain why. Maybe some part of me knew I'd end up here. Quietly, I stepped out. The cold bit through my coat. Every crunch of gravel under my boots felt too loud. I approached the car, careful not to wake him. The closer I got, the more I saw the stubble, the pale cheeks, the dark circles carved by regret. His hands were tucked beneath his chin like a child's. I set the bag gently on the hood, weighing it down with a folded business card. Nothing fancy, just one from the office. I flipped it over and scribbled in black ink. Warehouse hiring. Ask for Earl. EM. My handwriting looked shaky, not from age, but from restraint. I wanted to knock on the window. I wanted to tell him I still loved him. But love, sometimes, only teaches through absence. For a long moment, I just stood there, watching my breath fog in the cold. I thought of Lucia, how she'd scold me for letting things go this far, then hold my hand and whisper, he'll come home when his pride runs out. Maybe she was right. I turned and walked back to my truck, leaving the bag and car where the frost was already beginning to form. The drive home was silent, except for the sound of tires on wet pavement. Savannah slept while I wrestled with forgiveness. The next morning, the sun broke through the gray. Damien stirred awake to the sound of seagulls and distant traffic. He rubbed his eyes, groggy, and sat up. That's when he noticed the bag on the hood. He opened it slowly, confusion etched across his face. The smell of warm bread and chicken hit him first. Then he saw the card. He picked it up, reading the words, fingers tracing the initials at the bottom. The handwriting, he knew it instantly. Sharp, deliberate, familiar. His throat tightened. The morning light caught the moisture in his eyes, making it look like dew. He didn't say a word. He just held the card, pressing it between his palms as if it might dissolve if he let go. For the first time in months, he smiled, small, broken, but real. 3 days passed before I saw the envelope. It sat on my desk when I came in one morning, placed neatly on top of my planner. No stamp, no return address, just my name written in a hand I hadn't seen steady in years. The coffee stain on one corner gave it away before I even opened it. Damien. For a moment, I just stood there, the hum of the office fading behind me. Rose's voice echoed faintly from her room, phones ringing somewhere down the hall, but all I could see was that envelope. The handwriting was familiar but smaller now, humbled, as though each letter was an apology in itself. I slid it open slowly, careful not to tear the paper. Inside was a single sheet, folded once. The smell of stale coffee lingered faintly, his old habit from nights he used to stay up doing homework at the kitchen table. My throat tightened before I even read the first word. Dad. The simplicity of it hit harder than I expected. He'd stopped calling me that years ago, somewhere between the money and the interviews. I didn't know how to start this, so I'll just start where it ended. I was wrong. About everything. About business, about family, about what it means to be a man. I sank into my chair, the page trembling slightly in my hands. You taught me how to build. I just thought building meant climbing on top of everything, including the people who helped me up. I see that now. When I lost everything, I realized I'd never actually earned anything. Not a dollar. Not respect. Not even your pride. The words were uneven, lines crossing slightly, the ink darker in places where his hand must have pressed harder. I could almost see him sitting somewhere dim, coffee cooling beside him, trying to find the courage to tell the truth. Mom used to tell me that you were a quiet man, but your silence was never weakness. It was patience. I used to think patience was the same as control, that being strong meant never needing anyone. But strength without gratitude is just arrogance wearing a suit. I exhaled, setting the page down for a moment. Outside my window, Savannah was waking up, the first rays of sunlight reflecting off delivery trucks pulling into the company lot. Men unloading boxes, forklifts humming, the sound of work continuing. The same sound that had built everything we owned. I picked up the letter again. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm not even sure I deserve that. But I wanted you to know I've been working real work. Manual labor. The kind that leave your hands sore, but your mind quiet. It's strange how peace looks different when you have to earn it. The paper crinkled as I reached the final lines. I don't have much right now. Just a car, a few clothes, and a job that pays me by the hour. But for the first time, every cent I make feels clean. And if this is what you meant when you said you wanted me to be a man of my own, then maybe I'm finally learning. You took everything so I could finally earn something. The ink faded near the bottom, like the pen had run dry. No signature, no plea, no closure. Just that last line sitting there like a full stop that didn't need another word. I read it again aloud, my voice low but steady. You took everything so I could finally earn something. The sound of it filled the room, heavier than silence, softer than anger. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope, sliding it into my desk drawer beside my wife's old locket. It felt like it belonged there, another fragile proof of what love costs and what truth redeems. For a long while, I just sat there, the hum of the city faint in the background. The letter hadn't asked for forgiveness, and I hadn't decided to give it. But something in me eased, like an old wound finally realizing it didn't have to keep bleeding to be remembered. 6 months passed before I stepped into that restaurant again. The same waterfront place in Savannah where everything had fallen apart. The chandeliers still glowed gold against the glass. The river still shimmered beneath the lights, but time had changed the air inside. It wasn't laughter and luxury anymore. It was quieter, humbler, like even the walls remembered what pride once cost. I told myself I was just there for dinner. Nothing sentimental. No revisiting ghosts. But as I stood by the host stand, the scent of rosemary and champagne pulled me backward, back to that night of music, applause, and the sound of my son's hand against my cheek. The hostess smiled politely. "Table for one?" I nodded. "Yes, please." Near the window, she led me to the same table. The same one. I didn't ask for it, but fate must have been listening. I sat down, unbuttoned my jacket, and placed a small photograph on the white tablecloth. It was worn at the corners, a little faded. My son and I, years ago, he in his graduation gown, me beside him, pride shining brighter than the George's sun. The same pride that blinded me later. The waiter approached, pen poised. But before he could speak, another voice interrupted. "I've got this one, Marcus." I looked up. Damien stood there, wearing a black button-down shirt and an apron. He looked older, leaner. There were lines around his eyes now, not from arrogance, but from living. His posture was steady, though his hands fidgeted slightly at his sides. For a moment, neither of us said a word. Then he cleared his throat. "Evening, sir. Welcome to Riverfront Hall." It was formal, polished, the kind of professionalism a man learns when he's building something new from the ruins. I nodded. "Evening." He gestured to the menu. "The kitchen's changed since you were last here. I recommend the roasted salmon." "Is it good?" I asked, my tone even. A faint smile tugged at his mouth. "Best thing on the menu. I'll make sure of it." He took my order quietly, noting it on his pad, then hesitated. "Would you like a drink? We have a new house red." "Water's fine," I said. He nodded again, then turned to leave, his voice softer this time. "Coming right up, sir." As he walked toward the kitchen, I watched his steps, measured, focused. No longer the strut of a man chasing admiration. It was the walk of someone rebuilding from the inside out. I glanced at the photo beside my plate. The boy in that picture had been full of promise. The man serving tables now was finally learning its price. When he returned, he set the plate before me carefully. "Here you go." "Thank you," I said. He looked at the photo on the table, and his breath caught. "You still keep that?" "Always," I replied. His eyes lowered. "That was a good day." "Yes," I said, before either of us learned what good really meant. The silence that followed wasn't heavy, it was human. Two men sitting in the same moment, divided by mistakes but connected by blood and memory. He reached into his apron pocket, pulling out a small folded napkin. "Your check, sir," he said formally, placing it beside the plate. But when I opened it, it wasn't a bill. It was another note, written in his handwriting. "Thank you for not giving up on me." I looked up, but he was already walking away, head bowed, shoulders squared. I folded the note, tucked it beneath the photograph, and called out softly, "Damien." He turned. I gestured to the empty chair across from me. "Sit." He hesitated, then walked over, slowly, like he wasn't sure if the invitation was real. When he sat, neither of us touched the food. We just looked at each other. The father who had rebuilt control, the son who was learning humility. I reached into my pocket, pulled out the old wedding photo from that awful night, and laid it beside the one from his graduation. Two memories, two versions of us. My voice came quiet but clear. 5 slaps for food, son. 5 moves for truth. We're even. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His eyes glistened, and for the first time since that night, he didn't look away. Outside, the river kept moving, steady and endless. Inside, the candle between us flickered once, then held. And just like that, the story of our war ended. Not with forgiveness spoken, but with peace quietly understood.